Imagine a dystopian London in 2243, where shadows hide more than just secrets. In the first episode of Dark Realities, you will be transported to a city where safety is merely an illusion, and each corner conceals a disturbing truth. It all begins with a brutal murder. Lucas Taylor, the son of a veteran police officer, is found dead in a scene that resembles a macabre ritual. The message left by the killer is not just a warning but a promise, a threat that shakes the city to its core, revealing that no one is truly safe. Over the course of 7 episodes, each character will be confronted with their darkest secrets, and the mystery surrounding the killer known as the Jack the Ripper of the future will grow ever more complex. Who is behind this string of murders? And what secrets will emerge from the shadows, turning each character into a suspect? Prepare yourself for a story filled with tension, unexpected twists, and suspense that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Dark Realities is not just a series. It's an enigma waiting to be unraveled. Shadows of the Past. The Return of Jack. It was a cold, dark night in London in the year 2243. The city was more illuminated than ever, with neon lights and skyscrapers projecting holographic ads into the cloudy sky, yet the shadows and secrets that inhabited the old streets still lingered. In a residential neighborhood, the security cameras seemed to be in order, functioning with precision. However, in the early hours, a new presence slipped by silently. All this heavy, dirty, and suffocating atmosphere served as a harbinger of something terrible about to happen. The city, despite its bright lights and relentless traffic, maintained an air of mystery that seemed to defy time. The sky over London was typically a grey veil, with heavy clouds seeming to hold the city's breath. The neon lights tinged the narrow streets with an oppressive glow, illuminating just enough to make the darkness even more threatening. The air was thick, filled with the metallic odor of factories and the fog that never dissipated. Among the abandoned alleys, worn buildings, and graffiti-covered walls with protest messages, each shadow seemed to hide a secret, a story lost in the cracks of the rain-dampened sidewalks. The city seemed a mirror of the hearts of those who lived there, marked, corroded, with darkness that no spotlight could ever reach. A day like any other. Detective John Carter started the day as he usually did. Nearly 50 years old and with 20 in the homicide department, he had witnessed horrific scenes, but he had never felt comfortable with the level of violence that permeated his profession. To the sharp, insistent sound of the alarm, his body, marked by life on the streets, could no longer hide the effects of time and choices. His calloused hands slowly passed over his unshaven beard as he looked at his tired reflection in the mirror. He glimpsed his graying hair and the lines on his face, reflections of a life full of battles and sacrifices. Dressed and ready, Carter left for the station, where the narrow, always-lit hallways seemed like an endless maze. Little did he know that day would mark the beginning of the most challenging case of his police career. That morning, while reviewing documents in the office, the police psychologist, Dr. Alice Torrance, stopped by to deliver mental assessment reports on the new recruits. She and Carter maintained a cordial relationship, although he always distrusted the coldness with which she analyzed everything, as if each person were merely a case on her mental board, as if they both knew that each kept a deep, impenetrable layer. Alice, a slender woman with controlled features, observed Carter with that analytical and emotionless gaze, as if he were just a puzzle. The rigidity of her thin lips and the gleam in her clear eyes made it clear she rarely let anything slip that wasn't calculated. They exchanged a few short words about previous cases, but the encounter was abruptly interrupted by an urgent notification Carter received on his communicator. The operator's deep, restrained voice sounded on the other end. "Detective Carter, there's been a homicide on Baker Street. We need you there immediately. The first victim." The apartment of Lucas Taylor, son of a respected veteran police officer, was a vision of horror in its rawest state. The worn walls seemed to absorb the recent death, and the room smelled of fresh blood mixed with mold. Carter analyzed the scene in silence, observing every detail. Lucas was lying on a dirty sofa, his face frozen in a rictus of pain, eyes wide open in a terror that perhaps only he had seen before his last breath. His body was covered in precise, cold cuts, revealing a meticulous ritual Carter had never seen before. There was something disturbing about that death, an almost artistic pattern in the arrangement of the cuts. But what caught his attention most was what lay on the coffee table beside the body, a photograph of Lucas's father, sleeping in his own bed, taken at a close angle. The message was clear and cruel. No one was safe, not even under their own roof. And next to the photo, a series of newspaper clippings was arranged in a strange order, as if the killer wanted to highlight the characters who would soon be involved in the plot, either as suspects or likely future victims. Each clipping referred to a specific person. Richard Vaughan, the businessman. One of the articles showed a recent hostile acquisition made by the Vaughan Group, of which Richard Vaughan was CEO. The report was filled with insinuations about how Richard used blackmail and threats to complete the purchase. Miriam Smith, the former nun. Another clipping showed the headline about her expulsion from a convent in rural England, where the reason seemed obscure, though the news implied her exclusion was related to practices less than Catholic and more carnal. Luna Sky, the hacker. A local news clipping talked about her detention for hacking the Department of Transport and being sent to a juvenile correctional facility. Her skills could be quite dangerous in the long run. Thomas Hill, the widower. Another clipping described the accident that claimed his wife, Pamela Hill, a police officer in the London Metropolitan Police, mentioning issues with alcohol dependency. Ethan Brown, the footballer. A social column showed the player celebrating one of his professional achievements, recalling the scandal involving him and a digital influencer in which an intimate video of both was leaked 4 years ago. Jack Langston, the journalist, signed and highlighted in red ink, by Jack Langston. All the articles had a sensationalist tone, and his name appeared as a reminder of the manipulations he made to get more audience. After preliminarily cataloguing the entire crime scene, Carter returned to police headquarters to initiate investigative procedures and arrange for all persons of interest in the case to be summoned for questioning. A claustrophobic room. In the cramped, neon-lit waiting room, the suspects waited, exchanging uncomfortable and restless glances. The atmosphere was tense, and each person's presence seemed to amplify mutual suspicion. Richard Vaughan, standing, wore an expression of disdain. "Some of us have important business to take care of," he snarled, glaring at Jack Langston. Jack didn't hold back. He returned the glare with a defiant smile. "And some of us have businesses that don't need lies to thrive. Right, Vaughan? You only have what you have because you know how to use dirty methods." The words were met with an uncomfortable silence, but the tension between them was evident. Miriam and Luna watched the confrontation with intense gazes. Luna, with an ironic smile, seemed to find it all amusing, while Miriam kept an impassive face, almost indifferent, though her eyes betrayed a veiled contempt. Thomas was visibly uncomfortable, his face pale, hands trembling, likely wishing he was anywhere else. Ethan, on the other hand, showed open boredom, flipping through a magazine as if he were untouchable. Interrogations. One by one, Carter called them into the interrogation room. The room was cold, with lights that highlighted expressions and amplified the tension on each face. Dr. Alice Torrance watched everything from an adjoining room, where she could observe every reaction without being noticed. Richard Vaughan. Seated, Richard looked at Carter with an expression of exhaustion mixed with defiance. He mentally recalled every dirty move, every bribe and manipulation, but let nothing slip in his expression. To him, anyone there could want to harm him, but he didn't feel guilty about anything. Richard was the personification of self-confidence. Tall, with well-groomed grey hair and an impeccable suit, he always exuded an authoritarian, controlled presence. His face bore worry lines, though he maintained a superior posture, with calculating and cold eyes. In business, Richard was known as ruthless, willing to crush anyone in his way. For him, the world was divided into two types, those who served and those who served him. Miriam Smith. Miriam was a serene-looking woman with straight brown hair that fell in a simple, modest cut, but her expression held an intensity that belied her religious past. A former nun, expelled for carnal weaknesses, Miriam wore discreet clothes, but her gaze always hinted at something deeper. She was intensely devout, but her religiosity was something dark, almost fanatic. She believed her sins were merely a form of purification, and that the end justified the means, whatever they were. Upon entering the room, Miriam kept a rigid posture, responding concisely and formally. In her mind, flashes of the past haunted her, memories of the convent and her choices. The judgment of others bothered her, but she maintained her composure with the serenity of one who does not fear their own past. Luna Sky. When it was her turn, Luna sat back, as if immune to the weight of suspicion. Her mind worked quickly, thinking of all the times she had hacked confidential information for others, especially the businessman and the journalist. She knew she held secrets that could cost some dearly. Luna was a young woman with a discreet appearance, almost invisible among the others. Small and pale, with deep blue eyes and short hair dyed blue, she wore loose clothes that hid her silhouette and helped keep her anonymous. She had an extraordinary skill with technology. She was an intriguing figure, known for creating back doors for those interested in exploring secrets, and her ambiguity raised suspicions about her real intentions. Thomas Hill. Thomas sat with his head down, an expression of sadness and weariness. He thought about his late wife, feeling the weight of guilt and the fear that his secrets might be exposed. To him, anyone there could be plotting something against him, but his dread kept him from even considering revenge. Unlike Richard and Alice, Thomas seemed a man marked by sorrow. His grey, unkempt beard and deep-set eyes revealed a clear emotional exhaustion. He was tall, but his hunched posture suggested someone carrying an invisible burden. After his wife's death, Thomas withdrew from almost everyone, harboring a quiet anger toward the police system that, in his view, had done nothing to help her. He hid his wounds with a bitter smile, and many said he had become an unstable man, unable to control the grief that consumed him. Ethan Brown. Ethan was the charismatic figure of the group, with a contagious smile and a muscular, athletic build that captivated fans. His dark hair and bright eyes reflected the carefree charm of a young man, rich and famous. He loved the spotlight, which was evident in every gesture, but to those who knew him well, it was clear that Ethan had a dark side. Many had suffered because of his selfishness and narcissism. Ethan seemed indifferent, with the posture of someone who thought he was wasting his time. His mind wandered, recalling his encounters, some documented and compromising. The interrogation seemed like just another formality to him, something easy to manipulate. Jack Langston. Jack, with his blonde, messy hair, casual appearance, and careless air, was a journalist with a dubious reputation. With a charismatic face and a provocative attitude, he seized every opportunity to manipulate the truth in exchange for sensationalist headlines. Jack saw the world as a story where he was the narrator, willing to create his own versions. Jack entered last, confident. He smiled at Carter, as if it were all just a game. In his mind, he recalled every twisted story and every person he had manipulated. Every word he uttered was carefully chosen to insinuate without revealing, a true game of intrigue. The rise of shadows. Arriving at the precinct, still shaken by the strange coincidences and the weight of the first death, Carter opened the office door, shrouded in shadows. The late afternoon light filtered through the blinds, casting lines of contrast across the room and reflecting on a solitary envelope on his desk, which hadn't been there when he left. The envelope, dark-colored and sealed with an old emblem, had an almost ritualistic look. As he approached, Carter noticed that something was inscribed on the front, but it wasn't common words. It was a sequence of incomprehensible symbols, exuding an air of menace. He felt the weight of the moment and a strange familiarity with the way each symbol was meticulously drawn. As he scanned them again, he read. A chill ran down his spine. He examined the symbols, trying in vain to decipher them mentally. Something told him it was more than a riddle. It was a game. As Carter was lost in thought, a new message arrived on his communicator, announcing that a second victim had been found under similar circumstances. The shadow of Jack the Ripper seemed once again to loom over London, like a vengeful spectre determined to expose and punish every hidden sin.